This is a part 1 of a 2-part video. I suggest that you watch this with a open mind because this is just a proposition in order to create a basis for reasoning, and it has little or no evidence, so it's mostly based on anecdotes and ideas. Alright, here's to hoping that no one steals this idea and makes a movie and me never getting the recognition. Here we go. Get ready to use your imagination. For any event, there's 2 types of causation. One is the proximate causation and the second is the ultimate causation. One simple example to give you in order to understand these 2 types of causation is, let's say Newton observed an apple fall from the tree. Now, what caused the apple fall from the tree, if you look at it from approximate causation, it could be because the mass of the apple itself, it got heavy, or because of the weather condition, maybe it got windy and it fell from the tree. But the ultimate causation, why the apple fell to the ground, is gravity. So, we'll use the same concept to understand consciousness, and we'll start by looking at the proximate causation and build it up to the ultimate causation. Now, we all know that anything and everything around us functions based on laws of physics, and going all the way back to the Big Bang Theory, everyone's used to it. We all know how the universe came into existence and how 4 fundamental forces emerge from this Big Bang, which is the electromagnetic force, gravity, the weak and the strong nuclear forces. But what is energy? Energy is such a versatile word. Like everyone, they're used in spirituality, they're used in physics, they're used in, I don't know, in philosophy a little bit, bad energy, good energy, feminine energy, masculinity. It's all over the place. But to me, for the sake of this video, let's consider energy as the measure for inertia. And we all can agree that energy can neither be created or destroyed, meaning energy is more of a scalar quantity. Unlike force, which is more like a linear quantity, force depends on certain direction. Slowly but surely, these forces and energies started to do the Lord's work and formed all these 118 elements on the periodic table that we know today. During this rapid and random process of, different molecules and atoms reacting with each other and falling molecules and other complex things, Earth happens to be the only habitat where quote-unquote life was possible. Theoretically, by theory, let's go with that. By theory, what is dead to us? Because it's a bit confusing, also debatable to me, if not to the general public, to me. Because let's say a person is brain dead, but his organs are fine, everything else in his body is functioning, and right now we have technology to keep them alive, but the brain is dead. So would we call that as a death? And also, now that we understand energy can be contained and it can neither be created or destroyed, this also allows us to donate organs after we die. So they literally take your organs and put it in another person, and using this external force, this energy is recreated and they're able to use the organs. So for the sake of this video, let's just say that when an organism fails to function and problem solve in order to exist as a whole, it's dead. Okay? So if you lose your arm or leg, you're still you. But if you fail to function as a whole or problem solve, let's consider that at that point you're basically dead. For just this video. If the cells make up our body and all these 4 fundamental forces are the reason for its displacement and function, what is consciousness? How do we quantify consciousness? Is it a linear quantity like a force, or is it a scalar quantity like energy, or is it a quantity that we cannot quantify yet? Going back to approaching this with proximate causation, in this realm of understanding consciousness, the first thing or the question to ask would be, how do you know that a species is conscious? So right now there are certain tests to find out if certain species or an animal is conscious. It is on the basis of understanding if they are self-aware. So self-awareness is when you are aware of your own identity, your body, like you identify yourself as a squirrel or a human or a dog, and you can tell if you see another species of the same kind. So that's where the science at, and there's something simple as mirror test, where they place mirror in front of an animal and see if they're self-aware of their own body and understand their level of consciousness. But why did we evolve to have consciousness? There's one possible reason, which is that consciousness allows us to have experiences, like in terms of different senses, and experiences build up to data, like which is memory. So with experience and memory, it's easier for you to navigate in the environment and problem solve, so which results in intelligence. So experience, memory, which leads to intelligence, will help us to survive on this planet, so we're not at the mercy of the environment. Let's say you see a tree fall or a forest fire catching up to you, you're self-aware enough and you are able to move and understand the environment in such a way you know what to do to survive, if that makes sense. Unless unlike a vegetable that's laying on the ground, it's just gonna get roasted. No pun intended. But here's the catch. There are a lot of specimens and species that are intelligent but don't have a brain, or they're not conscious like animals are. For example, slime mold. Just Google slime mold solving a maze, or slime mold replicating the map of England or map of America. Slime mold is literally a single cell organism that is able to problem solve and also learn. Like what? Because so far what we understood is that in order to problem solve, you need to have consciousness and have experience and create memories and attach meaning to things, which is information, and that data is then used in order to solve a problem. But this fucking single cell organism is doing all this without a brain. It has one cell. So this made me wonder and think about consciousness from a completely different perspective. What if consciousness is constant? Let me explain. We all know that the speed of light is constant, but the wavelength and the frequency of the light changes when it passes through certain medium, right? We know that speed of light is constant in vacuum, but the frequency and the wavelength changes when it passes through a medium. So what if we imagine consciousness as something constant in every matter that exists in the universe, and the intelligence that it carries is the variance? I know some people call this panpsychism, but please give me a chance to explain this better to you, okay? Let's use an anecdote or example that your eyesight is constant, right? But you use a tool like a binocular to spot a target that's 45 feet away. But some binoculars, which are way more crazy cooler, you can look at a target that's 12 miles away, like miles away, right? So what if consciousness is like your eyesight and intelligence is the tool that consciousness looks through? So the more the intelligence, the more self-aware you are about yourself and your consciousness. Okay, I know it sounds crazy, but just let me restate that. The level of self-awareness is directly proportional to your intelligence, but the consciousness in everything is a constant. You're just a medium for this consciousness, just like how light passes through air, water, glass. It changes its property a little bit, but it's still light, you know? So let's call this self-aware consciousness as the active consciousness, which is, it knows that it is conscious and it's a being, and a consciousness that is on a slime mold as a passive consciousness, because it is unable to express or communicate, or how do I say this? Like, it is unable to experience through various senses, but it is still intelligent and it is still conscious. So let's assume that a slime mold is passively conscious, and us humans, which is the most intelligent that we know so far, is actively conscious, okay? In order to understand this better, allow me to explain split brain patients. Now, if you know what split brain patients are, great, but I'm just gonna give a brief description. Split brain patients get their brain hemispheres literally split in order to stop epilepsy and seizures transferring from one side to the other, if I'm right. So basically, they have two brains in one body, and oftentimes these two brains have dilemma and the patients experience it. A very popular example is someone buttoning up their shirt. Their right hand is buttoning up and the left hand wants to undress. So these dilemmas that happen in the patients is very rare. It's not on an everyday basis, but they still occur. And there's a lot of experiments done on them to show that left brain has its own perception and has its own intelligence and has its own opinion and its own way of being, and so does the right brain. But the left brain lacks the ability to communicate. It cannot express itself. It's not emotional. It has no emotions. It's just It's just there. It's conscious and it can problem solve and it has intelligence. But the right brain, it attaches meaning to everything, meaning, reasoning, and it is able to express and communicate. So when the patient does what he does based on the left brain's decision, he's unable to explain why he did that because it's separated from his right brain. They're not working together. It's very fascinating. I will link some videos in my description. Please go check it out. It's crazy cool. Okay, so what do we understand from these patients and how does it apply to my idea or my theory so far? What we understand is that, like I said, consciousness is constant, but the intelligence is the variance. So your brain is split into God knows how many different parts and has different levels of intelligence. And then whatever decision or the output that you get from what you want to do is it's like on its own a government over there, and everyone's voting for something, and the outcome is an average probability of what is the right thing to do, if that makes sense. It's just like, because these patients, even though they come across such dilemma, at end of the day, one of the hemisphere overrules the other, meaning someone overrules the other and the decision is made. They're not constantly living in a right or a left or in a conflict state of mind. So meaning they all come to a conclusion even though they have different opinions. And crazy enough, it's not just me who thinks about this. And if I'm right, Jeff Hawkins has a theory called 1,000 brain theory, and it's very relevant to what I'm trying to explain right now. So I will also put his interview with Lex Fridman in the description below. Moving on. Here's where my idea gets incredibly weird, okay? I want you to imagine all the 118 elements on the periodic table left loose in the atmosphere, right? Let's just imagine we take each element from the periodic table and we just let them go. There is this element of randomness, right? There's this randomness and chaos. And imagine each element as a passive conscious being and has its own personal traits in them and preferences, and decides to form molecules based on what is nearby. At the end of the day, they're all gonna achieve equilibrium, right? They're all gonna, end of the day, form a certain molecule, and no one's going to be unstable. The atoms, like hydrogen, nitrogen, or anything on the that we know, is seeking to form this bond in order to become something else and have a separate set of properties as a bond in order to survive. Because atoms decay. Yes, it's true, I looked it up. Atoms decay. So in order to survive, they have to bond with other elements and stabilize themselves. Okay? Now, I want you to hold on to this thought. I did warn you, it's gonna get weird, but here we go. Just like how atoms are unstable without forming bonds with another atoms and become a molecule and, so on and so forth, I feel like we as humans are unstable if we are isolated. And more than ever right now, we know that for a fact because of COVID, we're isolated and we can see the consequences for that, right? instead of forming physical bonds like atoms and molecules do, we are conscious and self-aware and have experiences, which leads to have emotions and meaning. These elements help us to form not physical but emotional bonds in order to stabilize ourselves. Furthermore, because of these emotional bonds, we have created this beautiful interconnected network of human species across the globe. We are all connected to each other. We're all doing our part in order to survive and survive and thrive. Even though we are on top of the food chain, we're still dealing with this problem of randomness. No one can finitely tell me how long I can live, exactly the number of days and hours I can live on this planet, because of this element of randomness. Okay, let's just simplify things. Let's say I pour a glass of water right now. I take a glass of water and pour it right now on the floor. And can you use the laws of physics and all the scientific technology possible and tell me exactly the pattern the water would make on the floor and exactly the diameter, how far the water will flow? It's almost close to impossible because of this element of randomness. It's always going to be there. So I think that is the main problem that we should be looking at. How is nature going to deal with this problem of randomness and eliminate chaos and create order?